So good afternoon, friends, and welcome to our India-Nepal military cooperation webinar. This is a webinar on military cooperation between two friends, India and Nepal. We have done other webinars with Nepalese friends in the recent past, but this subject, of course, is of great interest to our military colleagues as well as civilian colleagues. It's a subject that reminds us of this very deep-rooted and ancient friendship and relationship between India and Nepal. It conjures up images of brave Gorkha soldiers who have actually made both Nepal and India very proud of their performances in various wars around the world. So today I'm very happy to welcome this very distinguished group of panelists that we have. I've already mentioned the Nepalese panelists. I haven't missed any from their side. From our side, we have Ambassador Rakesh Sudh, Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, and Dr. Nihar. From the Nepalese side, we have Mr. Geja Sharma Wagle, Major General Binoj Basnyat, and Mr. Sunil Casey. And hopefully, very soon, we will have Dr. Shambhu Simkhada as well. A few housekeeping chores. We have a very interesting session ahead. And to make it very fruitful and outcome oriented, I would request you all to kindly switch off your mics, keep them on mute until you're invited to speak. I would also request you to see if it's possible to switch off your own mobile phones so that you are not disturbed while you are speaking. I request attendees, the participants, to use the Q&A box for the questions that they would like to pose to panelists, and if possible, identify the panelist to whom it is addressed. I have been asked to say a few words to begin this webinar, and I think I should begin by saying that this webinar has in part been occasioned by the forthcoming visit tomorrow of the Chief of Army Staff, General Naravane, who is scheduled to visit Nepal. This is his first visit. This is obviously a routine visit in itself, because the Army Chief normally visits Nepal soon after assuming office. And as you know, the Chief of the Indian Army is made an honorary general of the Nepal Army by the President of Nepal. And you are aware that in January this year, on the 12th of January, if I'm not mistaken, the Chief of the Nepal Army likewise had visited India, and our President had also made him an honorary general of the Indian Army. So that's an old a tradition that has been in place for many years. As close neighbors, India and Nepal share very unique ties of friendship and cooperation. These are characterized by an open border and deep-rooted people-to-people contacts of kinship and culture. There has been a long tradition of free movement of people across the borders. The border itself is, of course, as you all know, a very long border, 1,850 kilometers, and Nepal shares this border with 5 Indian states: Sikkim, West Bengal, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Uttarakhand. Nearly 2 million Nepalese citizens live and work in India, and around 1 million Indians also live in Nepal. The India-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1950, it institutionalized century-old special relations that exist between our two countries. And Nepalese citizens can avail facilities and opportunities at par with Indian citizens in accordance with the provisions of the treaty. Another special feature, the one that we devote ourselves today to in our discussions, is the bilateral relationship in the field of, the military field, the military sphere. I can now see that Dr. Shambhu Simkhada has also joined us. Good afternoon, Mr. Simkhada. Very warm welcome to you. I'm glad that you were able to overcome the technical problem, and very grateful to you for joining us. High-level exchanges, if I may continue, high-level exchanges between India and Nepal have been, a very marked feature of our bilateral engagement, and especially since the present government assumed office in India. Prime Minister Modi has visited Nepal twice in 2014 and again in 2018. And if I could draw your attention to the fact that the 2014 visit was the first by any Indian Prime Minister in 17 years. So that was quite a milestone in itself. India and Nepal have several bilateral institutional dialogue mechanisms, including the India-Nepal Joint Commission. And there are, in general, regular parliamentary exchanges, people-to-people exchanges, many of which at this stage have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. But I would assume that this will soon be overcome, and our exchanges will revert back to their normal levels once the pandemic is under control. I myself had the great pleasure of visiting Nepal in March at the start of the pandemic, and I had very useful exchanges, all-round exchanges with scholars, diplomats, officials, think tanks, and came back with a very, very positive assessment of the future of our ties. We have, during the pandemic, as you know, extended humanitarian support to Nepal. The Prime Minister of India held a video conference with leaders of SAARC member states to discuss a strategy to combat the pandemic. And he had a telephonic conversation with Prime Minister Oli as well on the 10th of April 2020. And they both agreed to keep the supply chain intact during this period of unprecedented crisis. We, on our part, as in the government of India, has assured the government of Nepal of our fullest assistance, including the supply of medicines in this time of grave challenge and need. India has already provided 23 tons of essential medication to Nepal. We have sent life-saving ventilators, special medicines, COVID-19 test kits, etc., including for the Nepali army, by the way. And Indian security agencies at the border have also been extending all possible support to Nepali migrant workers waiting to cross the borders. In defense cooperation, which is the subject of our webinar today, you're all aware that we have always had wide-ranging cooperation in this field. India has been trying its best to assist the Nepal army in its modernization by supplying equipment and providing necessary training facilities, assistance during disasters, joint military exercises, adventure activities, and bilateral visits are other aspects of our close defense cooperation. A number of defense personnel from Nepal attend training courses in various Indian Army training institutions. The Indo-Nepal battalion level joint military exercise Surya Kiran is conducted alternately in India and in Nepal. The 14th Surya Kiran exercise was held in December 2019 in Nepal. And since 1950, India and Nepal have been awarding, as I said before, the rank of honorary general to the army chief of the other side. This is, of course, in recognition of the mutual harmonious relationship that exists between the two armies. We, of course, have experts today who will speak on this, but I might also add here that the Gorkha regiments of the Indian Army, especially the brave soldiers who come from Nepal, about 32,000 Gorkha soldiers from Nepal, they have really acquitted themselves very well. They've covered themselves in glory, both in peace times and in times of war. There are about 7 regiments, as I understand, in the Indian Army. The UK has gone down from 4 regiments to now just 1 regiment with 2 battalions. The Indian Army maintains about 25. district soldier boards in Nepal, all functioning in tandem with the defense attaché in our embassy there, to arrange for the disbursement of pensions and to organize welfare programs for retraining, rehabilitation, assisting the soldiers and their families in multiple and myriad ways. So all this and more will be covered today by our distinguished panelists. And without much further ado, I therefore want to thank you all once again for joining us at this webinar on India-Nepal military cooperation. And I would like to begin by requesting our distinguished colleague from Nepal, Dr. Shambhu Simkhada, to kindly address the webinar and to use 15 minutes, if possible, to deliver his remarks and observations. Dr. Shambhu Simkhada has been convener of the Eminent Persons Council and also permanent representative of Nepal to the United Nations, the WTO and other international organizations in Geneva. He's had a distinguished career, as you can see, including as chairman of the UN HRC, and he's also been Nepal's ambassador to Switzerland. So with these few words, I now request our first speaker, Dr. Shambhu Simkhada, if I may call you Ambassador Simkhada, to very kindly address this webinar. 15 minutes is the time available for you. Thank you very much. May I please request you to unmute yourself, please? May I request you to unmute yourself? Thank you.
Am I okay?
Yes, perfect.
Very good. As I was saying, first of all, namaskar. I'm sorry I missed a little bit of Ambassador Chinoy's earlier introductory remarks, but I got most of it. And knowing his very distinguished career and, of course, the kind of depth he has of, Indo-Nepal relations, he has covered quite a lot. So I will. I'm a bit weak in technology, so as a result, I had sent the organizers in Nepal a short PowerPoint for their projection, and they tell me that they can't do it, so I have to do it on my own. I don't know how to do it, so I'll just read from it. Well, first of all, I wanted to start by exchanging greetings. Nepal has just finished celebrating our biggest festival, Dasai, as part of India has, the Durga Puja. And of course, we are about to enter the festival season of Deepavali and Diwali. So I exchanged greetings especially at this time when both countries, we are going through a difficult COVID-19 pandemic, and of course being affected by so much by it. So the Festival of Lights will bring inspiration for all of us to get over this this experience and this pandemic. The reason I started with the greetings of the festivals is the festivals are also characterization of our very common civilizational bonds, and of course the deep-rooted and wide-ranging relationship between Nepal and India. And of course, such a deep-rooted and wide-ranging relationship obviously presupposes a very strong security relationship. And the relations between the two armies, the two militaries, the topic of the webinar today, its evolution and its future prospect, is a reflection of that close friendship at all levels of our state-to-state and people-to-people relationship. Now, this relationship obviously goes back to the times of British India. And of course, the role the Nepali army has played in starting from the time of India's independence and consolidation. As Ambassador Chinoy rightly mentioned, the exchange of the honorary general title of the Chief of the Army Staffs of the two countries, the reciprocal arrangement, is again another reflection of that. Soon we will have India's Army Chief of Staff in Nepal to receive that honorary title, which we are very much looking forward to convey our deep sort of friendship and express the strong bond of relationship between the two armies, but also between the two countries. You highlighted a whole range of other issues that bind the two countries and, of course, the two militaries together. So I don't need to really go into that. Simply to state that it's a very strong bond between the two militaries and the two armies that exist today. And of course, the topic of our discussion, I would imagine, is how can we further strengthen? What are the prospects of this strengthening exercise in the days to come? Now, to discuss about that topic, obviously India and Nepal are both democracies. I know from the history of India that in fact the Indian Army, the military, and its unflinching support to the democratic process is one of the strongest factors that makes India a enduring democracy globally, as an example. In fact, while democracies are being challenged all over the world in different ways, that in India is sometimes role of the two Indian institutions. One, of course, is the army. The secondly, the Indian Election Commission. How India organizes that, that supreme exercise in democracy is really truly amazing. So it is in this background, and of course the important role of the Nepal Army also in strengthening the ongoing political transition in Nepal. Very positive role of the Nepal Army in that process. I think this has to be kept in mind. So the point is, while we discuss the prospects of the relationship between the two militaries, in my view, it can only be a part of the larger, broader gamut of relationship between the two countries. As I said, the deep-rooted, the wide-ranging friendship between the two countries. So seen from the perspective of this perspective, from a normal interstate relationship, I have often described Nepal-India relation as magic. The border, the open border that was discussed earlier, is a case in point. The free exchange and movement of people across the border is another one. During the festival, so many people came from India, those who were working in India, and now quite a lot of them are returning. This is an example of how open and magical this relationship has been. So the question that I want to sort of address, and Ambassador Chinoy, today I am not wearing any of my hats, either the ambassador hat or in fact the Nepali hat. I'm speaking purely as an intellectual. And as a result, I want to be pretty candid about things so that if we are really talking about the prospects of strengthening relationship between two countries and the two militaries, then of course, in an exchange of ideas like this, that we need to be pretty open about it. So in that sense, this relationship that I call magical, why is once in a while this relationship misjudged, mismanaged to the point of a mess? And the two recent events, 2015 and the recent border issue, are cases in point. Now, luckily, the role of the two militaries have been, despite some of the difficulties that we have on a larger political and diplomatic fronts, the role of the militaries have been positive all along, starting from the time of the British rule in India. I was just reading a history of how this honorary title started. There is a nice article by a historian in the Nepali press where he outlines that during 1885 to 1993, the relationship between the Nepali palace and the British resident in Kathmandu deteriorated to the point that, in fact, the Governor General was forced to include an agenda in the Council of British India about Nepal's sovereignty. And it was then that the Chief of the Army, British Army Chief of Staff, very vehemently opposed any discussion on that topic. And that reflecting the deep relationship between the two militaries. He not only emphasized the continuing cooperation of the Gorkha army to the British, but in fact, he highlighted how the Russian threat was growing. And as a result, if there was to be a conflict with Russia of British India, that in fact, the help of the Gorkha army was essential. And as a result, any debate in the council, British Council on India, on Nepal's sovereignty would be highly counterproductive. And as a result, he vehemently opposed that. And subsequently, the Governor General decided to completely take out that agenda from the at all. So that is a historic point. We know what happened in 2015, the important role of the Nepal army, and of course, with the support of the Indian army, the early lifting of the blockade. So these are examples of how that history exists. As I mentioned, despite the fact that there is a general lack of movement on the political and diplomatic front, especially after the eruption of the border issue, the fact that Chief of Army Staff General Narvane's visit is taking place at this time is again another example that, in fact, while on a broader front, this beautiful, magical relationship gets messed up once in a while, that in fact the two armies have remained cordial, and as a result, this is a reflection that the two armies and of course the two countries want to move beyond this immediate sort of situation, and in fact restore the wide-ranging and deep-rooted friendly relations that have always existed between our two countries. So this highest level visit after the border development, in fact, is a very clear sign of the both governments moving in that direction. And of course, we all, while this deadlock was going on, I published a piece called 3 Ps to reset India-Nepal relations. And one of them was to prevent both sides from making statements, from doing things that would adversely affect this close relationship and friendship. And on the basis of that in fact we need to move progress in the future. And so as a result, I'm very delighted that this visit is taking place. Now, as a student, as a practitioner, and subsequently as a teacher of international relations, I have often been known to talk about what I call a transformative thinking in IR, in international relations. And the question that I raised earlier, why does such a beautiful relationship, such a magical relationship, get messed up once in a while? The underlying fact is the notion of national interest. Obviously, India and Nepal, as two sovereign, independent countries, conduct their foreign policies on the basis of what they perceive as in their best national interest. It's quite natural. this famous saying in foreign policy, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies, there are only permanent interests. Now, I happen to view that this 17th century idea that was enunciated initially by British scholar politician, later British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, which later became much more popularized by Lord Palmerston, needs to be redefined in the India-Nepal context, primarily because I see no relevance of the idea of enmity between Nepal and India, with such inextricable bonds of history, geography, culture, politics, and economics. So as a result, I would like to redefine this very notion in a way that our national interest of both countries, by the way, is best protected by permanent friendship. Now, if understood and managed well, I argue that in fact the two most significant developments, one, the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship, and second, Nepal's proposal to make Nepal a zone of peace, were in fact both motivated by this complementary idea of India's need and desire for a permanent friendship with Nepal, so that there is no threat emanating out of the Nepali territory to India's security, and Nepal's aspiration and Nepal's view that this is best achieved if there is perpetual peace and tranquility and stability in Nepal. This is what these two very, very good ideas actually meant. But because we cannot see that, we oftentimes become prisoners of the past, prisoners of geography, prisoners of history, that in fact the biggest lesson of history is to learn its lesson. And if we are able to learn that lesson, only then we can understand the true meaning of these new things. That is the issue of transformative international relation I talk about. And that is why my piece called Decoding the Matrix of Nepal-India Relations, the SRS conundrum, is basically meant to decode that relationship. Now, if you look at it from a larger perspective, that is what the tragedies of the two world wars brought. And in fact, the visionary thinkers of that time, visionary leaders of that time, established the UN to institutionalize this notion called national interest harmonization. That in fact, in the 21st century, with the dynamics of time and technology, no single country, irrespective of how powerful, can single-handedly resolve some of the issues of environment, climate, terror, with implication on security, and so on. So as a result, this idea called national interest harmonization is what we need in terms of our transformative thinking. Now, when we bring this to the context of the relationship between Nepal and India, and most specifically focused on the relationship between the two armies, Nepal's location between India and China is a fact of geography. It is also an objective reality that as the second largest economy, soon to be the first, China is already has a reserved seat at the global high table. And I have absolutely no doubt, and I'm all for it, that in fact India will soon reclaim and get its rightful place there. Now, in this rise of our two neighbors, what is the nature of the relationship that India and China want to follow with each other? Do they want to go the same way as Western articulation of conflict and wars as the inevitable processes of the rise and fall of the great powers? Or should we reflect on a much more Oriental wisdom-oriented foreign policy of coexistence? Now, in saying that, I do not dispute the fact, and in fact, interestingly, Western scholarship, for instance, Paul Kennedy and Samuel Huntington, will not agree in most things intellectually. But there is one place where they both categorically agree. That is, a small country like Ireland, like Britain, was able to conquer and in fact rule such vast parts of the world, not necessarily because of the superiority of Western values, but their military power, military strength. So in that sense, I do not dispute the fact that both India and China, of course, want to build strong militaries to defend their rising place in the world. But the question that comes to my mind is, should that then lead to an outdated, hegemonic, and conflictual polarity? Or should we think about a new model of competitive, of course, rising powers there will be competition, but a managed competition with cooperative plurality? That is the question. And in concluding that, as it relates to, I bring it back, this broader notion to the context of Nepal-India relations, and of course, the relationship between the two armies. One is the idea of what I call the paradox of proxy. Because we are so close, that we are so inextricably interlinked by a whole range of issues, that there is obviously, that makes our relationship, India-Nepal relationship, so vital, so important. But that also makes it rather complex. There are a number of complexities that are inherent in India-Nepal. Size is obviously one. India, whether some of the people in Nepal like it or not, is a great power, has always been a great power, and is going to be a great power, and in fact a superpower. On the other hand, Nepal is situated between two countries, and of course a relatively very small one. And as a result, there are these small country syndromes. So the sensitivity with which we need to manage this is, I think, critical.
Two more minutes, please. A minute or two more minutes.
I'm concluding.
Thank you.
In this perspective, as I said earlier in the beginning, the two militaries have excellent relationship, and we need to strengthen it further. That relationship will largely depend on the nature of the relationship between India and China. I mean, India and Nepal, India and China, India and Nepal. Now, in all of this transformative direction, I see the centrality of India as, in fact, the only country with the possibility to direct future international relations. Because China and US seem to have, sort of decided to go their different ways. And in this sense, what will be the nature of Nepal-India relations in this new context will obviously affect the nature of the relationship between our two armies, between our two militaries. And I'm all in favor. Incidentally, I'm also now involved in the National Defense University in Nepal. And of course, one of my ideas is, in fact, I believe the world needs a transformation, a transformative thinking, if it is to avoid some of the same tragedies, either of wars or of foreign subjugation, which India, of course, is not unaware of. With this, Ambassador Chinoy, I'm really delighted that you thought of me to share some of my very kind of scattered thoughts on the topic. And of course, I wish Nepal-India relations and of course the relationship between the two armies all best wishes. And again, as I said, we're very much looking forward to the visit of Chief Narwane and a successful visit to Nepal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Simkhada. You have actually delivered a very magisterial, presentation, and I suspect that this could be perhaps material for your next book. Is that something that you're planning? For you actually given us a very broad overview of our bilateral relations, and you've also very successfully juxtaposed our bilateral ties in the evolving regional and international situation. And at the same time, all that you've said gives me such great hope for the future of what you've described as a magical relationship. The sheer magic of our ties will ensure that we remain what we are, friends forever. Thank you very much for those very perceptive remarks. I now turn to Ambassador Rakesh Sudh, who has had a very distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service, and he's currently Distinguished Fellow at the ORF. And he, as you all know, dear friends from Nepal, he was our ambassador to Nepal as well, among many other assignments that he held with equal distinction. I request Ambassador Sood to take all of 15 minutes, please, to deliver his remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sujan. And let me first of all thank you and IDSA for inviting me for this very topical webinar. It is a pleasure to meet old friends, especially my good friend Ambassador Simkhada after a long time. It's good to see you, Shambhu, and good to hear from you.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Let me pick up a couple of points from what Ambassador Simkhada said and take it forward from there. I think it is quite clear. He said that a strong security relationship that has existed between India and Nepal is, in a sense, is part of a stronger old political, civilizational, historical, cultural relationship. Now, so I know we are focused much more on the relationship, the military to military relationship. So we will try and keep it to that extent, but I think it is important to keep in mind that if the larger political relationship is undergoing a stress and strain, and then somewhere or the other, it may reflect on this as well, because after all, this is a subset of it. The second thing, I think, very important thing that Ambassador Simkhada said, and I would like to flag that, he said that the national interests of both India and Nepal is served by a relationship of permanent friendship between the two countries. But then he went on to bring in the China factor into it and so on. And I think it is important to keep that also at the back of our mind. Now, having flagged these two issues, let me say that the relationship between, just as the relationship between India and Nepal is a relationship that, in a sense, India inherited in 1947. Similarly, the relationship, the military to military relationship is also something that we inherited, because the British Indian Army had a number of Gorkha regiments at the time of Indian independence.
May I just request Ambassador Shambhu to mute your mic, please? Thank you.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you. That's all right. This way we can get rid of any static or echoes. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Please continue, Rakesh. Please continue.
Yeah, as I was saying, so in 1947, actually, there was a tripartite agreement between UK, India, and Nepal, which sort of said, all right, these are the 6 regiments, 6 British Indian Gorkha regiments that came to India. 4 of them were retained by UK. And also included in that was the tradition of annual recruitment. And as you very rightly pointed out, Sujan, I mean, there are about 32,000 Nepalese citizens who serve in the Gorkha regiments of the Indian Army today with great distinction, honor, and are very, very valued members of the Indian Armed Forces. So just as this is an inheritance, as it were, a legacy from prior to 1947, similarly, the 1950 treaty, about which you spoke about, and also Ambassador Simkhada spoke about, is in many ways also a legacy of pre-1947 period. Because I would like to mention this because I think it is important for our audience and others to remember that British India had a very special relationship with Nepal, in the sense that while Nepal was a sovereign country, there was also a British political agent who was appointed there, who had been there for since after the Treaty of Sugoli, to advise the King of Nepal regarding foreign policy and security related issues. So in a sense, it was a sovereign state. It was not occupied by the British, but there was a certain constraint on Nepal's foreign policy, security policy, etc., that had been imposed by the appointment of the British political agent. And I think Shambhu also talked of how there were ups and downs in the relationship between the palace and the British political agent from time to time. Now, this relationship also got evolved over a period of time, and the last major treaty that British India had with Nepal was the 1923 treaty. So obviously, and you know, these are the treaties that led to the open border and a whole host of other things. And so in 1947, when India became independent, there was a natural interest in looking at how independent India would have its relationship with Nepal. And these treaties sort of got rolled into what became the 1950 Peace and Friendship Treaty. Once again, a legacy from British India. Now, there is no denying the fact that we have seen ups and downs. The world has changed a lot since 1947. India has changed a lot. Nepal has changed a lot. So our region has changed. The world has changed. Both countries have changed. Now, the question, therefore, that we need to ask ourselves is, and meanwhile, of course, Nepal has been through enormous political transitions. I mean, I think in a sense, we have been relatively stable in India. We still have the same constitution that we adopted in 1950. Nepal has been through a number of constitutions, formal constitutions, a number of interim constitutions, and so on. From a 250-year-old monarchy, it has become a republic. Since I, in fact, often say that the current political transition of Nepal began with the first Jan Andolan, which was 1990, with the introduction of multi-party democracy. And if we look at it, therefore, from 1990 till 2017, the last election, where Prime Minister Oli was elected, during those 27 years, I would say that Nepal has had 27 prime ministers. Some prime ministers have not even spent a year in office. So it has been a tremendous period of political churning. But despite this political churning taking place, the relationship between the two institutions of the Indian Army and the Nepal Army has remained a very stable relationship. And I think a lot of credit for this goes to the way in which the institutional leadership of the two armies handled this relationship. So even though this was a legacy relationship, but it was maintained as such, it was honored as such, and in fact, it got even further strengthened because in 1950, the tradition evolved of conferring the rank of the honorary general on each other's army chiefs. General Cariappa was the first Indian army chief to be conferred this rank by the government of Nepal, and vice versa, and this tradition has continued since. Now, we know that General Naravne had some of his comments in May had generated a certain controversy in Nepal, and I think it was, somewhat unfortunate that this controversy got generated. So I am certainly very happy that he is now going to Kathmandu so that this tradition can be continued. And I think it speaks volumes for the strength of this tradition. Now, this is a very critical point that I'm making, which means that here we have a situation where while there have been certain challenges on the political front because of all the political changes that are taking place, internal political changes that have taken place in Nepal, and also now in a wider regional and global geopolitical sense. Here is a relationship between the two institutions that has remained, in a sense, somewhat insulated. However, I don't think it can remain permanently insulated, because even when I was there, and I think General Chauhan and General Basnyat would remember this, there was a period in time where, because of the Maoist objections, the Indian Army had stopped its recruitment rallies in Nepal. The Maoists had said that we will not allow this. We object to the idea of Nepalese citizens joining foreign armies. And as a result, because they created a security issue out of it, as a result, it was felt, this was before I landed up in Nepal, but as a result, it was felt that perhaps it would be better not to carry out these recruitment rallies. It took about 2 years of working with the Maoists and other people, and also mobilizing some of the retired ex-servicemen and their groups who were keen and who felt the weight of this tradition, who felt the value of this tradition quite strongly. And it is they who then were able to prevail upon the local political leaders to say that, look, this is a tradition that we value. And that is how this, after a 2-year gap, this tradition was restored. So I'm just giving this example to show that the overall political relationship will cause strains. So somewhere, while the two institutions of the armies need to certainly maintain the strength of this relationship, because it is a very valuable relationship. And as Ambassador Simkhada said, that if our national interests are served by a permanent friendship, then this relationship becomes a bedrock for that defined permanent friendship. But at the same time, we also need to be conscious of the fact that it cannot be completely divorced from the overall political relationship, which also therefore requires an attention to be able to brought back so that it can be brought back on even keel, and whatever differences or perceptional gaps exist on both sides. I think you mentioned the 1950 treaty. It is no secret to the people attending this webinar that the perceptions on 1950 treaty have become quite divergent between the two countries, and that it is therefore worth our while in both countries, at least among the people who attach value to a strong and positive relationship, who attach value to the idea of a permanent friendship, that we need to bring about this restoration so that the military to military relationships that have withstood this for the time being do not get any further shocks, but can continue. So in that sense, I'm personally extremely delighted. And I'm quite sure General Naravne, having realized how he had his inadvertent statement had led to a controversy, I'm sure he will be extremely careful this time. I'm sure the Nepali media will try and trip him up, but that is quite, Nepali media is known. I mean, you know, if you've been in Nepal, then you realize that Nepali media is very adept at sort of planting questions and then provoking you and things like that. So I'm quite sure that the Nepali media will try and do that. I guess that is their job. But I'm equally confident that General Naravne will be able to maintain a calm and dignified presence, and thereby ensure that his presence and the purpose for which he will be going is something that will add value to our relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rakesh Sudh, for also walking us through the history of our bilateral relations and for also emphasizing the importance of not just military to military ties, which, as you said, are extremely important and very good. And they act as a factor for stability in our ties. But also the fact that you mentioned that nurturing political level ties is of the utmost importance. And by political ties, I don't really want to limit my own view to political leaders. Political ties really translates into an all of government approach. So every government department, the states that are bordering Nepal, all of them have to work together with Nepal to better our political ties. As for media, I dare say that we also have the same issues on our side. So I think as far as the media is concerned, I draw no distinction between the media of Nepal and the media of India, or for that matter, anywhere else. Well, on that point, I thank you again, Rakesh, for very useful, very good, very informative remarks, as usual. I expected nothing less from you. Thank you very much. I now turn to, we have another Indian speaker lined up, and then we move to Nepal speaker. So I will now request Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan to deliver his comments. 15 minutes, please, if you can. General Chauhan is a decorated military officer of the Gorkha Regiment. And some of you might have noticed that before we formally began the proceedings of today's webinar, he was very fluently engaging his friends from Nepal in, the Gorkhali language. And I only envied him. But look, there is something strange about, Nepali and Gorkhali and all. Some of the vocabulary is uncannily similar. The syntax also, strangely, with Gujarati. I can't explain why. So there is a triangulation over there between what they speak and what the Gujarati speak and what the Bengali speak. And in between is vast territory, but nobody can explain why. Maybe we'll do some research on that as well. General Chauhan has served, above all, and this is of great interest to all of us, as DA in Nepal. And so he has direct experience of the military relationship. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy. Very kind of you to have invited me to attend and participate in this seminar. Thank you for introducing me, and also so positively. And it's been actually my career of the last 44 years, the high point of my career, that I had the opportunity and the good fortune to have served in the Indian Embassy at Kathmandu. I have been a soldier, as you mentioned, for the last 44 years. But more importantly, which I would like to point out to my Nepalese friends, that I have always identified my career, my background, my demography by my regiment, the 11 Gorkha Rifles. I was born in the regiment. I'm one of the few generals who were born in the regiment. And in fact, learned to speak Nepali before I spoke anything else, helped generously by my Nepali soldiers of my father's regiment. And hence, who himself was a pioneer of the regiment. He was one of the first Indian officers who joined the 11 Gorkha Rifles when it 48. I have spent a lot of my time studying Nepal. I was, as a young officer, I used to have this habit of spending a month in Nepal during my annual leave. And I must relate to you one experience which was so important in my career, which was so importantly positive in my career, that I feel it necessary to tell my Nepali friends how we in the Indian Army perceive them to be. I had gone for this trek to East Nepal, that is from where my soldiers come, the Rais and the Limbus, the Kirati tribe, in December 1983. It was a long time ago. And, we had reached the Arun River, or what we call in Nepal the Arun Khola, which is a very fast-flowing river. And unfortunately, it was about 7 in the evening, extremely dark in December, extremely cold. And also the boatman or the Maji had taken his boat and gone to the other side of the bank. And here we were alone. I was with one of my soldiers. We were alone, wondering what to do. Should we go walk it back to the nearest town or should we stay there? We had our sleeping bags, but no overhead cover. There was one house about a kilometer away whose light we could see. It was a candlelight or a hurricane lamp. And I asked my soldier, I said, look, we have no option, just go and find out if we can stay the night. And there was this young Nepali girl who had a young, equally very, very young, 1-month-old baby. And the moment she came to know that an Indian Army officer was there, she said, yes, of course you can come. There was only one room in the house, but she gave us place to stay in the cow shed. And so we slept in the cow shed. Next morning, when I woke up and I was getting ready to leave because the boatman had been called, I asked her, I said, Bahini, in Nepali, younger sister, why did you allow 2 strange men to come to your house? Weren't you afraid of what we do to you? And what she said, you changed my entire perspective in my career. I was a young officer, like I said, a lot of things could have gone wrong. She said, Daju, that is elder brother, when I heard that you are an Indian Army officer, I felt that God had come to my house and that gods don't do wrong things. And it was an amazing experience. I can tell you, it changed my entire thought process. And I realized that how we are as officers of the Gorkha regiments, of these very dedicated, fabulous soldiers of Nepal, how we are perceived by them and how they tell people about us. So that has been what I would say the beginning of my love affair with Nepal. Posting to Nepal, of course, as a defense attaché during 2004 to 2007 was a high point. It was difficult because the Jan Andolan came in the way at that time and its aftermath. So when I reached Nepal, it was a functioning kingdom. It was the kingdom of Nepal. And there was the Royal Nepalese Army that welcomed me. And I was, taken to the king to be welcomed by him. And when I left, it had become a republic. So I at that time. And all I can say is that throughout this very, very difficult time between the relations between us and Nepal, the Indian Army soldiers and the 128,000 Nepalese origin Gorkha soldiers who are now pensioners in Nepal and who are not mentioned by anybody, remain India's greatest friend and ally. I still remember, and I must mention it here, in 2005, after King Gyanendra had taken over the kingdom, the ambassador wanted to go to the district of Gorkha. And he was, he asked me, he said, look, you're my DA, I want to visit this place. Can you manage it? I said, of course I can. And I spoke to the district soldier board at Gorkha district. And they sat down, they said, of course, we'll welcome the Indian ambassador. And there were more than 35,000 ex-Gorkha soldiers to welcome the ambassador. And they had made 27 gates from the main road going to Pokhara, right till the town of Gorkha. And they welcomed the ambassador to a huge success. And the ambassador was Ambassador Mukherjee, was extremely, he was extremely grateful. And he kept asking me, he says, look, I never knew how good these were, how good these soldiers were. And these ex-Indian Army pensioners remain till today, and they will remain till their dying day, India's greatest support, India's greatest asset. And to them, we must continuously look at. We're talking about the security relation. We're talking about an army-to-army relationship. It is paramount that we continue to maintain that these 128,000 pensioners, who, along with almost 10 lakh families, are extremely important to India and are our greatest support. Yes, as Ambassador Sood mentioned, the recruitment within Nepal had to be stopped, but not because the government told us to, but because the Maoists, the PLA at that time with Prachanda, had said that they would target our recruitment rallies, and that the recruitment rallies used to be given security by the Nepalese police. So what I did was, after speaking to the chief of the Royal Nepalese Army and my own chief, he was General Geja Singh then, I moved the recruitment rally to a small town across the border, across the Sonali border. Just 20 kilometers from Sonali, we have some land there, and we moved the recruitment rally there and to Darjeeling, and our recruitment continued unabated. So even if somebody says that, the recruitment rally should not be done, it doesn't matter, because these boys, they are brought there by their fathers, by their brothers, by their uncles, and we remain till today a very important part of their lives. They maintain, and I am absolutely certain, because I can tell you, I have visited Nepal many, many times on treks. They maintain and they remain our greatest strength, our greatest support. It was actually the 1951 invasion of Tibet by the PLA that resulted in significant changes of the Nepali relationship with China. And China ordered certain restrictions on the entry of Nepalese pilgrims and contacts in Tibet. And Mao reportedly said that Taiwan, Tibet, and Hainan Islands were the Chinese territories and would be repossessed. But more importantly, he stated publicly that Tibet was the palm of a hand, and its 5 fingers were Ladakh, Sikkim, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Northeast Frontier Agency. This statement of Mao actually worried King Tribhuvan of Nepal, who invited an Indian military mission to Nepal for reorganizing and modernizing his army. Before King Tribhuvan's takeover, Nepal had no regular army or soldiers. They were actually part-time, and when not on duty, followed other professions. Periodically, they were called for parades in Kathmandu, and this army was ill-equipped and ill-paid. It is after the IMM arrived, the Indian military mission arrived in Kathmandu on the 28th of 1952. It was tasked to assist in the reorganization of the Nepalese army, and it helped in formulating the defensive plans against both internal and external threats. However, due to the political situation, this IMM was considered a sellout to India, which included then the BP Koirala faction of the Nepalese Congress Party. By December 1953, the strength of the IMM was about 197. And on the recommendations of the IMM, the RNA was downsized to 25,000, from 25,000 soldiers to 6,000 soldiers. And there were 17 checkposts, which with Nepalese concurrence was established along the northern borders of Nepal with China. Why I'm saying it is that there's a deeper relationship. We have always been there. Things have been difficult. Things will be difficult. And as all of you said, there are permanent interests which change in time with the ebb and flow of tide. And this will continue to happen. But I agree entirely with Ambassador Shambhu and Ambassador Sood, who highlighted this, that there is this magical relationship. It's a magical relationship because in no other country in the world do we get soldiers from another country. And the best thing is that in no other country do our Nepalese or the Nepalese soldiers considered as mercenaries. They are a part of our heart and soul. They're everything to us. And it's an amazing relationship that we cherish and we continue and want to cherish. However, by 1965, the Indian Army supplied arms, ammunition, and equipment to the entire Nepalese army of 17,000, comprising of 4 reorganized brigades. It catered for the replacement of the existing weapons as well as training. So we've been doing it since 1950. Unfortunately, the military relations soured with the withdrawal of the Indian military training team. But post 1989, once again, Nepal asked for our help in raising large-scale military formations by reorganizing the army from its battalions into brigades and divisions. We have been continuously been helping out Nepal. I was there, as I said, during the Jan Andolan. I was there during the time when the PLA was extremely active. And all I can say is that we were there for Nepal at each point of the time when they needed us, whether it was with ammunition, whether it was weapons, whether it was helicopters, or whatever they wanted. Under Ambassador Shamsaran, I remember we had this bilateral security meeting we used to have, and we would give the Nepalese army anything they wanted. And I know for certain that there were trucks given, there were Mahindra jeeps given, vehicles given, binoculars given, every kind of equipment was given. And we helped the Nepalese army fight the PLA, and also ensured that post the Jan Andolan, the Nepalese army would stay united and would stay the way they are. You mentioned, Ambassador Chinoy, the meetings that we've had with the Nepalese army, the Surya Kiran exercises, which were started by us actually at that time at a platoon level and now is at a battalion level, that we ensured that they continue. Most of the issues are focused in the Surya Kiran exercises on actually aid to civil authority, on problems, what might happen, like of the earthquake in 2015, of disaster relief, of fighting insurgency together. So in all, whatever Nepal has ever wanted, there was never a no from my side, never a no from anyone in the army side. I remember my chief telling me that whatever Nepal wants, Nepal will get. And that at that time, like I said, when Geja was the chief, he called me one day and I flew down to India and he told me, he said, look, I've spoken to General Prajwal Thapa, PJ Thapa, and whatever they want, you are not to say no. So that's been the kind of relationship that we've had with them. I have had the good fortune of visiting Nepal after that as a Director General of the Assam Rifles. I wonder if you know that Assam Rifles also used to recruit Gorkhas. And we have more than 14,900 Assam Rifle pensioners in Nepal, of which almost 10,000 are paid from the town of Pokhara or the District Soldier Board of Pokhara. I have sat there and talked to them in great detail. And as you mentioned, and as Ambassador Sood mentioned, besides the fact that we used to pay pension to them by hand, we also used to send medical teams. We still send them. We also send medical packets. We also send whatever they want, whatever Nepal wants, whatever they've ever wanted, they have got. We have given them advance like helicopters when they were just being inducted into the Indian Army. And regardless of whatever the thing was, Nepal got priority in every issue. Nepal is and must remain, I feel, at the head of our priorities. Everything because of its strategic location. The strategic location that Nepal sits on the top of India's Indo-Gangetic plain, makes it extremely important. What Nepalese must understand is that India has no defensible lines along the Indo-Gangetic plains. The only defensive lines that we have are across the Nepalese-Chinese border or the Nepalese-Tibet border. So it is axiomatic and extremely important for them to realize that that is the border we have to protect. That is the border that we have to deal with. And because there are no defensible lines beyond Nepal, we in India have to be extremely careful while looking at our security threats. Because immediately as you come out of Nepal lies the very important and strategic Siliguri corridor that we keep talking about, this 20-kilometer corridor. So, sir, thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's been a wonderful time, and I'm here to answer any questions. It gives me the greatest of pleasure to have spoken here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, General Shokin Chauhan. You have obviously related something that is very close to your heart. You began with that very nostalgic story, a sense of nostalgia. You were reminiscing about your personal experiences. And so obviously, Nepal is, as we can see, very close to your heart, as it is for all of us. You, of course, have visited Pokhara in all your military finery. But I too visited Pokhara once in the distant past, in the 1970s as a backpacker, sleeping on top of a bus in the middle of the night, watching the stars go by. But I must tell you that Pokhara left the same impression on me of being a very friendly place, even though I was roaming around there as a backpacker in the 70s. Thank you very much for those very heartwarming personal stories that you related to us. We all appreciate your inputs. I now turn to, thank you very much again. I now turn to Major General Binoj Basnyat of Nepal. He is a retired military official of the Nepal Army. He has served the Nepal Army with great distinction. He is a graduate of the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst Staff College, USA, and National Defense College, India. He is a well-known strategic analyst on South Asian affairs. I request General Basnyat to kindly share his thoughts with us. The floor is yours, 15 to 20 minutes, as the others have similarly taken about the same time. The floor is yours, please. Could you please unmute your mic, please? Yes, thank you. I don't get the sound. I don't get your sound.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Indeed. Whatever you did worked. So please keep it up. No, not at all. Not at all. You're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Chinoy and IDSA and the AIDIA in Nepal. So before I comment, the views and opinions that I express is through intellectual lenses and are my personal and does not reflect any institutions nor the government. First, it is important to observe this subject matter from a regional perspective. This is what I will coin in as a regional security architecture, or RSA. And for the 21st century security model, when India, the South Asian rising power, is being more implicated with the Indo-Pacific region, with the most recent signing in with the BICA and the Quad meeting that was held on October 6th in Tokyo, amidst the nations of South Asia and the world are acquiring space, adjusting to the altering geopolitical circumstances with China-US rivalry. Now, what can or is the vision of the RSA is the question that needs to be answered for collectively being responsible to common challenges. Indian Army is the second largest land-based in the world and fourth in terms of military strength, and will be the primary actor of the RSA. So the military plays a crucial role in the development of a nation. It facilitates implementations of government's external or internal threat. The armies in the region go against or set varied visions contrasting the RSA vision. The region will embrace a further instability and even conflict, and both the Nepalese army and the Indian army can't get away from the regional security catastrophe. So in this backdrop, so the origins of security cooperation began after the war in Nepal in 1814, with Gorkha soldiers were encouraged to volunteer for the East India Company. This was initiated after the occupations of Tibet by Communist China raised concerns of security and territorial integrity of Nepal, which drew Nepal even closer to the recent independent India with the signing of the 1950 Indo-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship. So in the recent past, some political realm and the perception at large have been influenced and observe things differently now, see Nepal's security relationship with both our immediate neighbors with identical juxtaposition and also extending beyond its neighbors. So an alternative strategic network was expedited with various MOUs, including the transit, transport, and allowing access to the seaports for third country trade and free trade routes, and joined the Belt and Road Initiative. Nepal-China Trans-Himalayan Multidimensional Connectivity Network, including the Nepal-China cross-border railways gateway to South Asia. So the agreements focus mainly on 7 categories, namely strategic communication connectivity with railway, energy with hydro projects, power trade, infrastructure development, agriculture, political and diplomatic gestures, and security concerns, as well as military cooperations with military training, disaster management, medical assistance, equipments for peacemaking operations, establishment of National Defense University in Nepal. This all has regional security repercussions, foremost for the Nepalese army to meet her mandate. So the current political empirical evidences is the visit by the Raw Chief of India, Samant Goyal, and the upcoming visit of General Narvane, Chief of the Army Staff, Indian Army, is being debated and covered with priority on most of the broadsheets and national TVs. So very responses communicating variations of opinions and change in psychology subsist. So before I analyze about the visit, let me quote what Foreign Minister Jaishankar said in 2016, quote, "Political stability and development in Nepal, along with its prosperity, is linked to India's security," unquote. The intent of the visits may be a time to materialize this vision of collaborations for a purposeful partnership. So the visit will be significant if the call sets the sights for the beginning of other bilateral diplomatic mechanisms. Though the chiefs of both the armies will be mandated by their respective democratic governments, Nepal-India military diplomacy or security diplomacy is an important part of the relationship. As people to people, the civilization relationship cannot be questioned. So is military to military relationship, though other instruments of power do have their own discourse. So this signifies, 1, the political desire to revisit the cause of distrust. 2nd, resume traditional practices and expedite other mechanisms. 3, stress that military diplomacy has been the backbone of relationship. 4, an opportunity for the government and the oppositions to bring forward issues that could be brought about for a new course. 5, understanding of India's security concerns in the changing environment. And 6, other powers like China's growing political influence, questioning the traditional regional security understanding. So the learning moment of time with aged relationship and a new situation. In Nepali, we call it Purano Sambandhama Naya Avastha. So this is where the military diplomacy comes in Nepal-India relationship. So military to military ties between our armies encompass establishing normalized institutional security through military education exchange, conducting military exercises, supplying military stores and equipment, and carrying out defense cooperations. So following the recommendations of the Nepal Bilateral Consultation Group, joint military exercises with the Indian Army began in 2011 that aimed to establish interoperability between the two armies. The nature of threats is altering with the shift in balance of power. So the world is witnessing a crisis of trust, problems in multilateralism, cyber criminals, corruption, poverty, terrorism, gender violence and trafficking, and environmental degradations leading to disasters. These are common challenges that need common answers. The Nepali army also began bilateral exercise in 2017, focusing on a terrorism disaster relief operations with the People's Liberation Army. Military-to-military relationship is on the rise now, and exercises with the US Indo-Pacific Army and the British Army is ongoing. So talking about the RSA, the first approach can be the BIMSTEC joint military exercise announced during the BIMSTEC summit held in Kathmandu on 31st August 2019. So the BIMSTEC military exercise is aimed at common efforts to counter international terrorism, illicit drug trafficking, cross-border organized crime, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations, and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, but was consumed in Nepal with uncertainty, where three arguments surfaced. One, that BIMSTEC was still working for a strong institutional mechanism, vision and charter for capability development. Two, whether it meant a change in Nepal's diplomatic principles of opting for military participations for peace efforts or countering common threats through regional alliances. And three, the fear that strong growing relationship with China would be imperiled. Foreign Minister Mr. Gaywali clarified that Nepal would not join any military alliances or be used against friendly nations, but would only prepare for natural disasters. The Ministry of Defense articulated on being unaware of the military exercise when the preparation progressed with communique. So the Nepali army did not participate in BIMSTEC joint military exercise after government decided to send only observers. So with this backdrop, the bilateral structures and organizations of security cooperations from a local to intergovernmental level exists. There are more than 16 bilateral committees and more than 50 subcommittees for securing coordinate environment in several fields, including security. So the way forward, national security requires rearranging, revitalizing and reshaping the defense, the law enforcement force, and the intelligence forces. Let me talk about two challenges that the Nepalese army has when it is transforming into a professional force in these challenging times and could strengthen the RSA where Indian army could come in. One, design the force considering the geography to defend the nation against, provide internal security and fulfillment its primary responsibilities. Two, streamline the capabilities for agile, innovative and adaptive army with mobility, high standard of training and the latest arms and equipment. So with Modi II's government, will be focusing and reviewing and the first neighborhood policy as part of the strategic dealings and foreign policy. And drive development of intelligence capabilities, strengthen military capabilities. Nepal and Indian army need to work as well as bolster efforts for regional stability and bilateral economic enhancement through intergovernmental regional apparatus against anti-terrorism regional approach, energy security, supply security, disaster management, and multilateral strategic connection. In narcotic drugs, fake currencies. So the need is to revitalize the recognition of in Nepal Indo strategic partnership with the RSA. First, India's transparent policy on security cooperation with Nepal. Second, establish defense diplomacy by initiating BIMSTEC SAARC Defense Ministers Conference and BIMSTEC SAARC Military Chiefs Conference. Third, BIMSTEC SAARC Intelligence Chiefs Conference. Fourth, BIMSTEC SAARC Law Enforcement Chiefs Conference. So let me conclude. political and economic institutions, intergovernmental international organizations are set after major wars like the formation of United Nations, IMF, GATT, World Bank have helped in the last 250 years to bring the world together and ensure that relationship have not reached in danger to bring to the new economic society. So it is important that India and Nepal and the region's relationship be strengthened when the world geopolitics is reshaping the Indo-Pacific region and all the trends of flashpoints are in China's periphery. China's political ambitions and rises making China more dependent and connected. And Nepal and India is on the table. India has become more important as well as for India. The immediate neighbors in South Asia is even more imperative than before. So Indo-Nepalese ties are unique, time-tested because of deep geographical, historical, cultural, family linkages. Therefore, leaders should not only focus on changing policies, but should also focus on consolidating Nepal-Indian military relationship to meet the 21st century challenges. Nepalese army should learn from the Indian army modernization, considering the equity, honoring of the past, and ensuring the equity of the Nepalese army, Indian army's future. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy.
Thank you very much, General Binoj Basnyat, for your very perceptive and very thoughtful remarks. You, of course, introduced the concept of the regional security architecture and how our bilateral relations, not just military ties, must be anchored within the ambit of the changing, opportunities and challenges in the context of the emerging regional security architecture. And I take that message very seriously, that we must go by Purano Sambandhma Naya Avastha. So that is something that we have to work on, both sides. By the way, I'm going to try and learn some Nepali as well. So next time when I see you at another webinar, please expect me to say something in Nepali as well. It's a very sweet language and I want to learn it as quickly as possible. May I now thank you once again, General. By the way, you seem to be sitting in very sylvan surroundings there. Luckier than most of us who are in indoors, because I could hear lots of nature, birds, etc. also keeping you company there. So you're a lucky man. But enjoy your afternoon there. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you very much. May I now request Mr. Geja Sharma Wagle to kindly address us, to share with us his thoughts and observations. Let's say 15 to 20 minutes, please. The floor is yours, Mr. Wagle. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy. Can you hear me?
Yes, level 5, all clear. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy, Ambassador Dr. Simkhada, Ambassador Sood, General Basnyat, General Chauhan, my good friend Dr. Nihar, and my friend Sunilji, distinguished diplomats and security scholars. First of all, I would like to congratulate IDSA and AIDIA for organizing this webinar on the highly pertinent theme in the wake of impending much debated visit of the Indian Army Chief Nepal. I wish this webinar great success. I hope this kind of webinar, dialogue, conversation, and track to processes will significantly contribute to widen, deepen, and enhance the country's centuries-old Nepal-India relations, including military cooperation and military diplomacy between two countries. In fact, it is my great honor and privilege to participate in this August gathering. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to IDSA and AIDIA for kindly considering me as one of the panelists among distinguished scholars of international relations, diplomats, and senior security officers of two countries. However, I am not an expert of security and military diplomacy like my fellow panelists. Therefore, I would like to request everyone to consider my views and observations as a student of security and military diplomacy. With the kind permission of the chair, I would like to start with the very special note of our unique bilateral relations. Nepal-India relations are very close, intimate, unique, and special since centuries. Therefore, in my opinion, Nepal-India relations is the vivid symbol of the special and unique relations that is a very rare symbol across the world. In fact, Nepal and India have shared interests and common security threats: international terrorism, cross-border crime, climate change, disaster and crisis management, religious fundamentalism, fake currency, religious and social harmony, cyber security in the digital age, human and drugs trafficking are the common security threats of both countries. Likewise, peace, security, stability, economic development, prosperity, and social and religious harmony in both Nepal and India are the shared interests of both countries. Nepal and India have very close multidimensional political, diplomatic, religious, cultural, social, economic, security, and defense relations. So that they have very close defense, military, and security relations and security cooperation. In my opinion, this kind of special defense, security, and military cooperation should be further widened, deepened, and enhanced to ensure peace, security, and stability of the region, respecting each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. This is and should be the fundamental principles of mutual defense and security cooperation between Nepal and India, taking into special consideration the shared interest and common security threats, as I mentioned earlier. As far as the security relations and security cooperation is concerned between Nepal and India, it is highly sensitive issues between the two sovereign and independent countries, which is natural. In particular, Nepal has some serious security concern with India, which is natural given Nepal's geopolitical location, strategic importance, and security sensitivity. Nepal has time and again been reiterating India to respect its sensitivity. In fact, Nepal has been respecting and will be respecting the legitimate security concern of India that have been raising through official and diplomatic channels during the diplomatic channels between Nepal and India. In return, India should also respect the sensitivity of Nepal without ifs and buts. Nepal and Indian Army have very unique and special fraternal relations since centuries. Is my fellow distinguished panelist General Chauhan and General Basnyat mentioned earlier, including General Ambassador Simkhada and Ambassador Sood. Both armies chiefs are the honorary general of each other countries. Therefore, General Narwane is visiting Nepal to be conferred as the honorary general of the Nepal Army on Wednesday. Our right honorable president will confer him the rank of honorary general in a spectacular function in the President Palace. In fact, this is a rare precedent across the world, and this kind of very special relations, though symbolic, have contributed to enhance the multifaceted Nepal-India relations as per the popular aspiration of both countries' people. In fact, in my opinion, this is the hallmark of intimate, close, and special military relations and military cooperation between the two countries, and this kind of cooperation is more important than ever before, taking into special consideration the emerging regional and international political, geopolitical, strategic, and security concern. Likewise, more than 32,000 young Nepali people are serving to India and the Indian citizens through the Indian Army. Citizens of a sovereign country are serving for another sovereign country's peace, sovereignty, and security. And they have been defending another country's unity, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence. Moreover, even during the war, some Nepali citizens who had joined the Indian Army sacrificed their lives for Indian security, integrity, and sovereignty. That signifies our very close military relations, including people to people. In my opinion, open border and deep-rooted people-to-people intimate relations are another landmark of Nepal-India relations. As a result of the open border, the people of both countries have highly benefited in many respects. However, the unregulated porous border needs to be managed, taking into consideration the flashpoint of security and its negative implications to national security of both countries. In my opinion, another important point is that the Nepal Army and the Indian Army played an instrumental role in lifting the blockade and resuming the dialogue between two countries in 2015 after the promulgation of the new constitution in Nepal to the people's democratically elected Constitutional Assembly of Nepal. Therefore, both army have been playing an important and constructive role as per the national interests of their respective countries. In my opinion, military diplomacy is an important aspect of foreign policy for both Nepal and India in the 21st century. And both countries should expedite their available diplomatic tools, enhancing their diplomatic relations and military cooperation, and taking the Nepal-India relations to a new height as per the national interest of both countries, Nepal and India. However, Nepal and India have some outstanding and contentious issues, including territorial dispute and border encroachment. In my opinion, all these issues should be resolved through a high-level political and diplomatic dialogue without blaming each other, undermining the sovereignty. In fact, the armies of both countries can and should play an instrumental role in creating a conducive environment for the dialogue to resolve these outstanding issues through peaceful diplomatic channel. I am sure diplomacy will prevail and all the outstanding issues will be resolved through high-level political and diplomatic dialogue as we did in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geja Sharma Wagle. Thank you once again for your very, very positive and well-considered remarks. You have, of course, mentioned to us the fact that there are outstanding issues between the two countries, and I agree with you that we must maintain deep engagement between our two countries in order to address all issues through dialogue, through diplomacy. Thank you once again for making a very positive contribution, as have the others this afternoon. May I now turn to Dr. Nihar Nayak and request him to make his presentation. Dr. Nihar Nayak is Research Fellow at our institute, the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses, and his area of expertise, as you all well know, is India-Nepal relations, and he's also working on climate change in the Himalayan region, certain other non-traditional security issues, and conflict and cooperative security in South Asia, Maoist conflict and cooperative security in South Asia. So the floor is yours now, Nihar, 15 minutes, please. May I request all other panelists to kindly review their mics and to see if they could kindly be put on mute. In case they are not on mute, kindly do so, because that will avoid the static and echo that otherwise tends to disrupt the proceedings. Thank you very much. Dr. Nihar Nayak.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Good evening, everyone. As a last speaker, it gives me an opportunity to highlight issues which are not covered earlier, because that makes my task easier. Earlier, I thought not to basically focus much on the historical aspect of this relationship, but I thought to a little bit focus on that, because some kind of confusion here. And no doubt, as other speakers said, that we had inherited this kind of military cooperation from colonial ruler, from British. But at the same time, I would like to mention here that the history of India-Nepal military goes beyond actually British colonial period, because for the first time the talent and the bravery and the valor of the Gorkha soldiers and Gorkhas were basically recognized by then Maharaja Ranjit Singh back to 18th century, and he recruited the Gorkhas into his army, whose army was in Lahore, and basically they are called basically the Lahore, or the soldiers of fortune. So that happened around, I think, 1806, and much later I think the British engaged the Gorkhas in the subcontinent. So therefore, my argument is that with the military to military relations are much older than the formation of the current geopolitical arrangements of both the countries. So that is a very important thing. We have to remind that it's not the British, but the one Indian king who recognized the talents of these Gorkha soldiers. Then coming to the presentation, the India-Nepal military relation is often people are saying that is very special. And so we have to identify what are those special elements. That's very important. I have identified around 6 elements which makes this relationship so special, and some of the elements are already covered by previous speakers. Obviously, the first and foremost is basically 32,000 Gorkha serving soldiers and the ex-Gorkha soldiers who are living in Nepal. And again, India has often recognized the talents and the bravery and the valor of these soldiers, and none other than the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, in August 2014, during his visit to Kathmandu, and he, in the Parliament of Nepal, he complimented the soldiers by saying that, I quote Prime Minister Modi, that India has won no war in which the blood of Nepalese have not been shed. So that's one of the best compliments I can ever the Gorkha soldiers have received from a top political leader of this an international statue. And previously, one of the topmost Gorkha army, Gorkha officer of Indian Army, General Manohar Parrikar, he also recognized the talents of these Gorkhas, and he said that, I quote, if a soldier says he is not afraid of death, he is either lying or he is a Gorkha. So it's the talent is very much recognized by India at the different point of time and the different periods, starting from the Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So therefore, in order to maintain this unique relationship and connection and ensure that the Gorkha ex-servicemen and the serving personnel, families, the dependents are well looked after, particularly in the different point of time, and particularly ex-servicemen in their older years. The government of India, with the support of Indian Embassy, runs various welfare schemes for ex-Indian Army soldiers in Nepal. That includes like welfare branch, which is basically which was created back to 1952. Now it has been said the Indian ex-servicemen welfare organization in Nepal, and there are many social welfare schemes are undertaken currently, including the medical facilities, ambulance services, educational assistance, and then providing basically infrastructure in the socio-economic infrastructure in the remote areas, particularly facilitate helping these families of these ex-Gorkha officials and serving personnel. So there are a wide range of, I'm not listing but one, I can just for the reference for these participants, I can say that there's a Bhupu, there's a journal published by our Indian Embassy, which has started in 2012, and the latest issue, the 2015. The Bhupu is a journal where you can get the details of this Government of India's welfare schemes undertaken in Nepal for this ex-Gorkha soldiers. So kindly may refer that. And the number two element is basically, as I said, that often many speakers have said that the Chief of Army Nepal Army is an honorary general of Indian Army and vice versa. This arrangement has been continuing since 1972. And the most important part of this element of the relationship is basically that often say that the military to relationship have worked as a savior to the bilateral relationship or the diplomatic relationship during this crisis time. Often we have seen that, and someone pointed out that as a subset of the entire relationship, when the larger political relationship, diplomatic relations are affected, and the subset is also affected. Perhaps that is not the case. As in my 15 years of research, I found that the two relationships which are not affected by when the state-to-state relations or diplomatic relations at a low level. That is, one is the people's level relationship and army-to-army relationship. Rather, I can give one example here, that in 2015, when this Madhesis protesters had occupied that open border, that India's former Chief of Army Staff General Dalbir Singh and Nepal's former Chief of Army Staff General Rajendra Chetri had jointly worked to persuade Indian political establishments to lift the blockade. So here the army is playing a crucial role, particularly helping the state-to-state relationship to in the crisis time. And often now when the General Naravane is visiting and the relationship also witnessing at its lowest level, I think again his visit is going to basically strengthen the relationship further, because this is going to the first high-level military, I think the visit is happening, particularly after this recent kind of border dispute between both the countries. And then the third element, the fourth element is basically, unlike the transient political, level of relationship, both the armies are permanent institutional forces and are regarded as the national pillar of strength, and from both in the India side and Nepal side. And perhaps I can say that the visit is happening, perhaps I think the initiative from both the army side more than any kind of political or diplomatic side, particularly this current upcoming visit. And the fifth element is basically, I can say that India's military aid to the Nepali army, and that is most important. And government India is the largest and number one in basically supplier of arms, ammunitions, and equipments to the Nepal army since, as I said, the General Chauhan said, since 1989. And there is a standing bilateral mechanism which is actually facilitating this relationship, particularly this military aid, that is called Nepal-India Bilateral Consultative Group. They hold this meeting every year, and they discuss about the requirements of the Nepali army. They discuss about the strategic issues. They discuss about how to strengthen the cooperation. They discuss about the joint exercises like Operation Surya Kiran. So the large number of issues they cover during this bilateral consultative group level meeting. And the sixth element, I can say that the last is the joint military exercises, Operation Surya Kiran, which is already covered by other speakers. 14th round of exercise already held last year. And the major objective of this exercise is basically helping each other during the disaster period, particularly crisis time, and fight against the global terrorism and other humanitarian assistance as it will be required at a different point of time between both the countries. So basically, the major objective is to understanding each other, basically bring basically closeness between two armies. That is the major objective of this military exercise, Surya Kiran. Then comes to that, my second part of my presentation is that why this visit is so important, because it is not covered because we are holding this program basically to understand the importance of this visit, General Naravane's visit to India. As Director General Mr. Sujan Chinoy mentioned that this is a regular visit. Obviously, he is going to be conferred as Honorary Chief of Army Staff of Nepal Army. This is going to basically when both the countries and India basically trying to improve the relationship, as I said, with the border dispute. So the visit is going to happen when basically to reconnect the relationship at this moment. And second, this will be the first high-level visit from the India side. And again, there are many misunderstandings. May not be all those bilateral issues may not be discussed, like the border dispute, other issues may not be discussed, but definitely there will be a set of a kind of understanding between both the state, which is missing at this moment. And thirdly, I can say that this will be the confidence building visit, confidence building measures visit, which would help to restoring the bilateral relations. The visit of the Indian Chief of Army Staff, however, breaks that silence, and it aptly demonstrates India's also willingness to engage, not only India but in the Nepal side also. And this has been made possible greatly by the efforts of both armies. It's not only one-sided, which is basically messages from the both sides. And they have been somehow succeeded in convincing the political establishment that this relationship is too vital. That's why this visit is happening. And the visit may not discuss as the border dispute, but definitely certainly remove many misunderstandings. And because during the visit, General Naravane will be meeting Prime Minister Oli, he'll be visiting obviously President, then he'll be meeting the Foreign Minister and other political leaders also. And he will also address the Nepal officials also in a special program. So definitely there will be a lot of engagements will be happening during his visit. And most importantly, the Nepal Army, it is very important to understand here that the Nepal Army's credibility has remained unmatched and is regarded as the most trusted public institution in Nepal. And currently, this is the right time to deepen the relationship, while the Nepal Army is currently commanded by one of the most efficient officers of the Nepal Army, General Purna Chandra Thapa, who is widely revered for his crusade against corruption within Nepal Army, and is also greatly trusted by Prime Minister Oli. So therefore, this is the right opportunity to basically strengthen the relationship. Moreover, the Prime Minister Oli also values General Thapa's victorious and professional attributes more than any other subordinates. So that is very important, because since he is such an influential leader, so many issues and many things can be covered during his visit. And the most importantly, recently during the COVID period also, Nepal Army's credibility has been further bolstered by the trust it has garnered from all the major powers, particularly India, US, and other countries. These powers chose to hand over the COVID aid to General Thapa, not like the civilian authority. That again demonstrates that the trust they pose on the Nepal Army and General Thapa's leadership. Despite the request from Nepal Army that this is not the right institution to hand over these items to, and better to basically approach the civilian authorities. But still, these major powers, they thought Army is the most trusted and the most reliable institution for basically provide all these COVID aids. So that's why it is very important when this kind of and particularly General Thapa is having so much faith in basically India-Nepal cooperation, and particularly in the military cooperation. And in the last part of in the concluding part of my presentation, I will say that the visit will definitely is crucial to both the countries. And the visit is, the outcome is massive behind the scene of efforts made by both armies. So the compliments should be given to both armies for this initiative. And they seems genuinely intent to exploring the prospects of the resolution and heralding a new era of bilateral relationship. And I believe that like 2015, I think this visit will again create a kind of new atmosphere to strengthening the bilateral relationship. And from here onwards, many of our existing bilateral institutional mechanism will be resumed, because on 15th of December, Prime Minister Oli had a telephonic conversation with our Prime Minister, and they had 11 minutes of discussion. And then after, on 17th of August, both the countries had meeting on oversight mechanism. And perhaps this visit is very crucial, and the joint commission level meeting will be followed after this. So I think this is going to be a very important visit, and I expect that the relationship will be improved after this visit. I'll stop here, sir. Thank you very much. I like to take question and answer and cover other issues later, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nihar Nayak, for giving us that overview. And you did sound a very positive and optimistic note, which is how it should be, given the faith that both sides have in our deep-rooted friendship and cooperation. So thank you once again for your remarks. Now, at this stage, we have a choice of moving to the Q&A session. But I'm wondering if we have Ambassador Manjeev Puri also with us. And if so, I could turn to him to make a few remarks, because he also had said he might join us. I'm not too sure about it. Only the webmaster will know what's going on. Nihar, can you mute your mic, please?
Yes.
Can you please mute your mic? Yeah, thanks a lot. And not your video. We are delighted to see you on screen. So please don't blank yourself out like that, unless you want, to nourish yourself. Well, anyway, thank you. So let me just turn to the Q&A part. If Ambassador Manjeev Puri is there, we will turn to him as well for a few words. And what I intend to do is actually run through this panel again, because what you might have done is made your own remarks, and you were the tail end, Nihar, so you had all the advantage of reflecting on all that had been said by others that preceded you. But other panelists may want to reflect on what was said by co-panelists. So I'll give them each a couple of minutes, please. But I'll first go through the questions here. There is a general question about how Nepal would view the rise of China, or perhaps assertive behavior by China in terms of the broader South Asian context. So that's one point on which people may want to reflect. Again, I think it's related to whether any third parties have any interest in undermining our bilateral relations and things of the sort, especially the close cooperation that we have between our two militaries. One more question relates to the fact that ours is an open border and people do freely cross onto the other side. And so is it, at the end of the day, something that one needs to consider in regard to any temporary impediments or hurdles that we might have in our bilateral relations? After all, it's an open border. You get the drift of this remark here, basically to suggest that since it's an open border, people do move around freely on both sides, etc. How far should this matter be taken in terms of drawing lines when really there are no lines really separating us in terms of the closeness with which we coexist? So, I mean, this is broadly the thrust of some of the remarks that have come in. Personally, I'm very happy to see the very optimistic remarks, the forward-looking remarks that have been made by suggestions that have been made by all the panelists. So let me now very quickly run through each of our panelists in just 2 minutes, please, because we have to finish this webinar on time as well. So I turn once again to the very erudite Dr. Shambhu Simkhada. Please favor us with your overall comments on all that has been said so far this afternoon. Thank you once again. Yes, please unmute yourself, Ambassador. You need to unmute yourself. Not yet. You haven't accomplished it.
Maybe from
That's
the.
it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you're on now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, Ambassador, I would have obviously preferred that since I started, that if I could go the last, but nonetheless, since you have turned to me, that's fine. In terms of the remarks, on the whole, I think we've had a very productive discussion that naturally has to happen among good friends. You know, I'm so delighted to see some old friends, Rakesh Sudh, yourself, Ambassador Nihar Naik, and of course many others from our side, General Basnyat, Geja, Ji, and all that. So if I go from the speakers, my only comment on Rakesh's remarks is I agree the comment on the Nepali media. They are trying to learn from our Indian media brothers and sisters, you know. So I just want to limit myself to that one. Now, as far as in the General Narwane's comments about the border, I have recently written a piece in the Spotlight on his visit. And of course, that was in many ways, from the Nepali perspective, a very unfortunate comment. But then subsequently, all the comments that have happened, and of course, the spirit of the visit, I think we need to take a look at things from a more spirit. And the fact that he has himself decided to come is, I think, an added advantage to clarify many things, while not in public, but in fact in kind of closed door discussions. On the general's idea, and of course related also to the question on some of the questions that have come. Obviously, the general Nepali perception is that China has never had any territorial ambitions south of the Himalayas. So as a result, these old theories of palm theories, or in fact, are they? So that is the general perception. But I agree with the fact that there is a substantial change in the posture that China seems to present. So as a result, sometimes, you know, I understand the position of the United States, for instance, in taking greater interest in the Indo-Pacific, in some of the agreements that General Binoj Basnyat talked about, the BECA, in the sense that within the framework of the America First policy. But obviously, my wish would be that between India and China, here we have a leader who is talking about win-win relations, who is talking about building a community of common prosperity, common destiny, and in China, Xi Jinping. And of course, we have in India such a leader of wisdom, talking about neighborhood first and then sabka saath, sabka vikas. But then if this idea cannot be practiced, these very laudable ideas cannot be practiced in our own immediate neighborhood, then what is going to be the
I seem to have lost you there, Ambassador. I seem to have lost you there. It's perhaps a problem with bandwidth. I've completely lost him there. So while we wait for him to come back and to conclude his remarks, may I in the meanwhile turn to Ambassador Rakesh Sudh? Maybe you can say a few words till we get him back.
Well, thank you, Sujan. Very briefly, I think it is important for people to realize that the India-China relationship has fundamentally changed. And if our friends in Nepal, they can keep talking about that, you know, we wish it was better, and I would share that wish. But I think the practical reality on the ground is that it has changed. And so Nepal perhaps needs to figure that out. And how they do that is important, because if Nepal wants to enhance its military relationship with China, as we know, in 2017 was the first time that military exercises between Nepal and China were held. We have seen a strengthening of that. In Chinese PLA is providing more assistance financially, etc., to Nepal. Now, obviously, if the India-China relationship is going through a difficult phase, then clearly this will not go down very well with India. And I think this is something that both India and Nepal will need to talk about. The second thing, I think that is why I emphasize the fact that you cannot divorce the military relationship from the political relationship. Both countries are vibrant democracies. And so therefore, the political relationship is what is going to determine. If we've been able to insulate the military relationship so far, I think we've just been fortunate because we have had an enormous amount of internal political instability in Nepal with 27 prime ministers in 27 years. I hope that process has come to an end with the new constitution in federal Nepal. And so therefore, we are going to see far more political stability in Nepal. And therefore, it will be that the political nature of our relationship will also determine the military to military relationship. So I think that is important and that we keep that in mind. And therefore, if, as Geja said, there are contentious issues, then I think these are issues that will need to be discussed at a political level, whether it is the boundary or other things, because these are not issues that get discussed at less than that, because it's a very sensitive matter on both sides. Finally, I would say that, we may have continued our recruitment during the time that the Maoists were objecting to it. And I fully agree with General Chauhan when he says that, yes, we stopped it on our own because we didn't want to create a security situation that, we are doing a recruitment rally and India gets drawn into the tense situation between the Maoists and the local police authority, the local army and the police authorities and so on. We may have stopped it voluntarily, and therefore we were doing it on the Indian side of the border. But the fact is that there is a growing sentiment in Nepal, and I think our Nepali friends are fully conscious of that. And certainly I read the Nepali media and I talk to my Nepali friends about whether they would like the recruitment to continue, because we can't just sort of have the recruitment going on the Indian border and pretend that it is not happening. That's not the answer. If it is a sign of a special relationship, then we need to understand, and both sides need to come to a very clear understanding that how this has to be continued. And so temporarily we could have shifted it to Darjeeling or to south of the border. But I think in the long run, we need to find a way if this is an irritant. And the same holds true for the other contentious issues that Geja referred to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I request Ambassador Simkhada to complete his intervention, please? Because we lost you for a while. Please unmute yourself. At the bottom, there is the mic symbol. So please unmute yourself there.
Right.
You're
thank
on
you so much. I got disconnected because, the Nepali electricity situation. So I was disconnected for a while. So I was basically saying in the third that, in fact, General Basnyat's idea that, in fact, our bilateral relationship in general and our bilateral relationship in terms of the military are very important. And of course, they need to be further nurtured and strengthened. There's no question about it. But, there is a saying, both being our civilizational bond. In the Rig Veda, there is an idea called Yatha Prinde Tatha Brahmande. As the microcosm, so the macrocosm. So as a result, in the current world, that in fact, it also needs to be looked at from a broader regional and global perspective. So in that sense, obviously these regional and broader developments will have important implications on the basis of which we need to update, redefine our positions. Finally, with Nihar's idea that I agree about the historical sort of processes, but my only point is the military to military relationship is strong, needs to be nurtured, further strengthened, but they are not necessarily always independent of the broader political and economic and diplomatic relationship. I think that is very important. So General Narvane's visit, I think, is very important. As I said, we have more or less recognized the development since that unfortunate comment came about. And between two friends, I think we need to look at the spirit, as I said, rather than any specific comment. But the biggest test of the visit is how will this open the door for negotiations at the diplomatic level, at the political level, so that we need to restore the relationship of trust and confidence. And that is what will be crucial for the security preoccupation that India has as a result of the open border. And that, I think, is the crucial question. And that is what I was referring to earlier, in the sense that historically, the two factors that have been very critical in Nepal's continuation as an independent sovereign country is, in fact, that it provides a close relationship with India, but also becomes a stable and peaceful buffer for any extraterritorial, external, extra-regional sort of situations, so that whatever happens outside, what is the nature of a relationship India wants to pursue with other countries, fine. But then within Nepali territory, that in fact it is a relationship of friendship, peace, peaceful stability. So in that sense, how, as General Basnyat was saying, how India's central role, I see not just in the region, but in fact globally, as well as intellectually. In fact, I see the role of India as being very centrality in terms of which way the regional relationship develop, the way global relationship develop. I think that is very important, and I think we need to work very closely in shaping that to the extent that we can help in confidence building. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Ambassador Simkhada. For the next two speakers, I'm going to throw in an additional question that's come in from one of our scholars here, and that is, how do we improve strategic communication between the two countries so that there is no misunderstanding between the two sides? May I request all panelists to kindly mute their mics, please? All non-speakers may kindly mute their mics. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So for the next two speakers, as I said, the question is, how do we improve our strategic communication? In order to ensure that there is no misunderstanding, there is no chance for anybody at any level to politicize any issues or to kind of, promote anti the other sentiments, So we need to work hard at that. I suppose the media is also part of that exercise to avoid any kind of politicization. But strategic communication is obviously very important. And I'm very happy to say that we have consistently had a very good dialogue with our Nepalese Nepali friends and colleagues in think tanks and various other institutions across Nepal throughout this year as well. May I now request General Shokin Chauhan to say a few words.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy. There are actually two very dominant perceptions that mirror our relationship with each other. And here I actually go back to history and quote what the Prime Minister BP Koirala very aptly explained about the relationship between India and Nepal. And he said, our ties shouldn't be interpreted on the basis of ancient history and culture only. Look at Europe. It may be one culturally, but they're always fighting and killing each other. Distrust doesn't disappear just because there's cultural affinity. Relationships are dependent upon differing perspectives on society and different expectations of the future. This seems to manifest our relationship with Nepal. We must be clear, and when you talked of strategic communication, I must make it clear that what we must be always telling, and I agree with Binoj Basnyat absolutely, is that the idea of being one people, but two nations should always be uppermost in our mind. We must understand that what is good for India is good for Nepal, and what is good for Nepal is good for India. There's another issue that I actually have covered and want to cover again. This is the strategic and unique location of Nepal as far as India is concerned. This is of immense strategic value to India as well as to China. India has traditionally looked at its frontiers, northern frontiers with China, as the Himalayan watershed. The watershed forms a formidable military barrier that can be crossed at selected places only, and therefore lend itself to the strong defense line, requiring significantly lesser resources to defend. Therefore, and this Nepal must understand, because I said this earlier, that any Chinese military or ideological influx or influence south of this watershed is inimical to India's interests. And since the mountains of Nepal open out to the great Indian plains, it is crucial for both Nepal and India to understand that these are crucial military interests of Nepal. The third issue, Ambassador Chinoy, that I would like to cover is the economic aspect of recruiting soldiers from Nepal. The recruitment of these soldiers who are not Indian citizens is a phenomenon which has no parallel in modern times and of great benefit to both India and Nepal. There is a number of reasons why this communication and connection should be continued. Recruitment of Gorkhas in the Indian Army is a great economic advantage to Nepal, and its cessation would produce widespread distress and discontent. And the second issue, which has not been covered, is for the last 200 years, this 1700 border between India and Nepal has been peaceful. If this recruitment of these soldiers were to cease, then the resultant economic dislocation and lack of outlet for the energies of a warlike and adventurous population that is there as Nepal, India might well be faced with another new and troublesome frontier problem. Therefore, it is imperative that in return for the money which flows into Nepal from India as pension and pays, India receives a guarantee of peace with her international border with Nepal. We must ensure that both of us understand that our relationship is a win-win situation for both of us. We are in this together. We must understand that unless we are in this together, and that one relationship is mutually beneficial to the other, we will never be able to, and we will continuously be looking at problems between each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, General Chauhan. May I now request General Basnyat to say a few words to reflect on all this that has been said so far.
Thank you, Ambassador Shinoy. We three events or political events that has taken place, which has geostrategic impacts. One is we must understand the 5 policies of the United States, and the other is the impact of good agreement between the United States and the Taliban. And this stresses, one is the stresses on the strengthening security arrangements, partnership and alliance. The second, it positions, the United States positions competitive diplomacy with a larger use of economic tool like fair and reciprocal. Third point is the economy is the component of United States national power. And the fourth is China and Russia as competitors that have emerged to challenge American power. So, and the other point is the policy of South Asia. Okay, the United States policy on South Asia. It has called on India to increase its intervention or investments in Afghanistan and take a more active role as a US partner in the region. And the other is the United States and the international troops withdrawal from Afghanistan. So with these, let me go to the second point. Is the trends of geopolitics, let's say in the Himalayan region and China, Nepal, India sector, that is, or the center of the Himalayan arc. One is that India and China's rapid economic growth, mainly on military, economic, and political influence in South Asia, with change in public opinion and psychology. Second is the strategic communication networks that has been brought about from north to south as part of BRI projects, and which will upgrade like regional linkages, and it upholds security, diplomatic, economic, and political consequences. And the third is the variety of transportation systems from air, land, rail. So all of these have implications on national and regional security. And the third point is the incidents that has taken place in the Himalayan region, where you talk from the Karakoram range to Myanmar. And the central part of the Himalayan plays an important part in our Nepal-India military relationship, which is part of the, let's say, important part on the Nepal-India bilateral relationship. And the other one was about the border. Like talking about, we must start investing, putting our knowledge together on how do we efficiently manage borders so that the people who benefit are not disadvantaged from it. But what is the mechanism? Maybe technology, use of simple mechanisms that will enhance the security along the borders, maybe a point to think about. And the other is the other mechanisms, and we have so many mechanisms that we talk about, but the joint working communique between the foreign ministers of both the countries play an important role and should also be a significant mechanism for strengthening our bilateral and the strong relationship we have. I think that I will end here. Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geja Sharma Wagle. A few words from you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy. I think it has been very fruitful and insightful session, and I enjoyed all and learned all. I think we shared a kind of very positive thoughts, and we complemented each other. My Nepali fellow panelists, Dr. Simkhada and General Basnyat, and fellow Indian panelists, General Chauhan, Dr. Nihar, and Ambassador Chinoy. I would like to raise a couple of issues. However, I highlighted the Nepal-India relations important part.
May I request you to speak up a little bit, please?
Yes, sure.
Could you speak up a little bit, or perhaps closer to your mic? Thank you very much.
Sure. So we highlighted the historic facts and figures of the very important and special relations between Nepal and India, but we have some outstanding issues, and we need to resolve them. I am glad that Ambassador Chinoy, Ambassador Sood, and my good friend Nihar also accepted that very reality. Among them, border disputes and open border are very crucial issues. We are talking about military cooperation, security cooperation. We are talking about relations between Nepal and India. Unless we resolve those kind of very sensitive issues, we cannot have that kind of military cooperation as we discussing right now. So I would like to request government of Nepal and government of India, and including like scholars, and we should start a very kind of formal, informal track to and that kind of discussion. It will create a kind of conducive environment to resolve those kind of contentious and pertinent issues. Unless we resolve those kind of issues, we can only wish for the fatalists, and we cannot create a kind of fatalists by wishing the good words. Another issues raised touched upon by Ambassador Chinoy, Nepal's relations with India and to China as well. We know the very reality that India and China are both rising powers, and Nepal is in between them. And is India saying that you have been following the neighborhood first policy? I'm not quite sure whether you have a kind of written policy document, or what kind of result you are. So far, I would like to hear from if I may ask, I would like to ask with my fellow Indian panelists, what kind of neighborhood first policy you promulgated and what you achieved so far, or whether you are going to review this kind of policy. My three questions I would like to pose, if I may. As far as Nepal is concerned, as a Nepali citizen, I can say something on behalf of Nepal and on behalf of Nepali government, on behalf of Nepali people. We do understand the very reality, geopolitical reality of Nepal. And our government, Nepal Communist Party, led by its chair KP Sharma Oli, recently promulgated a new foreign policy. Though it has not been publicized at into the media reports, it reads that the government of Nepal promulgated a new foreign policy that put neighborhood first. As you mentioned in India, our government has also followed a kind of policy that Nepal give first priority to its immediate neighbor, India and China. Though we have own relations with India, we have own relations with China, and some Indian media, some Indian scholars blaming that Nepal is a kind of Nepal is government by a communist government. It is close to China. It is following pro-China policy. But we have been raising our issues within the Nepal by my fellow colleague General Basnyat and Dr. Simkhada. We have argued in Nepali media that we should follow the policy in line with the national interest of Nepal. We shouldn't incline into neither India or China. This is the kind of discourse within the Nepal. But we have some outstanding issues with India, but we are in favor of resolving those kind of all issues to high level political and diplomatic channel. We have been raising those issues time and again through the Nepali media, and we have been assisting our government, we have been criticizing our government, and I would like to also request Nepal government of India and scholars like us, we should create a kind of conducive environment to resolve those outstanding issues to high level political and diplomatic channel. Otherwise, we may face some kind of problem as we have shared in and common security threats. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Geja Sharma Wagle, for your helpful suggestions as well on the way forward. I'm sure all of us will look into all these issues with the seriousness that they deserve. And it will fall upon Dr. Nihar Nayak to also address your question that you raised, and you wanted an Indian participant to answer your question and query about the definition of the neighborhood first policy of India. Of course, briefly put, it implies just that the neighborhood is very important for India, and that unless the entire region progresses together in terms of economic development and growing prosperity and peace and stability, India too cannot expect to grow at the rate at which we aspire to grow. And the second part of that is also that we, under this government, have a policy, neighborhood first policy, in which there is an element of non-reciprocity also. That is to say that we do for our neighbors all that we can, and we do not expect strict reciprocity. I mean, that element of non-reciprocity is also there. But I leave it to the academics to elaborate more on that. Nihar, a couple of words quickly before I turn to Mr. Sunil Casey, CEO, founder of AIDIA, who is in fact our partner for this webinar this afternoon. Nihar, the floor is yours.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Briefly, I have one point and one question, sir, you raised about this, how to improve the strategic communication between Nepal and India. I'll just little bit touch upon that also. First, I would like to share one thing that Nepal is still in political transition. The transition is still, the process is still continuous because the constitution is just 5 years old. And most of its institutions are vulnerable to this transition. I mean, some of the institutions, in fact, new. And only one institution which is quite robust and is a permanent one, that is the Nepal Army. Therefore, my suggestion here would be to Government of India, would basically, apart from strengthening these democratic institutions, which Government of India has been focusing since 1950, India must give equal importance to the Nepali Army, because this is one of the most strongest institution. And in this regard, India should reactivate and regularize the bilateral constitutive group mechanism, basically to ensure smooth supply of arms, ammunitions, and equipments to the Nepal Army. Because there is a point which Government of India withdrew and stopped supplying these very essential items to Nepal Army back to 2005, when just before the peace process, and India was a major actor in that. And the Nepal Army was very, very unhappy with that. Basically decision of Government of India. So Government of India should focus this, actually notice this sensitivity and ensure that they shouldn't stop this kind of supply in future. Regarding how to improve the strategic communication, I think now the ball's completely actually in India's court, actually, because there are so many contentious issues are there in bilateral relationship, and India as a big country in this region, as a big neighbor, I think India must take initiative in this regard. And many contentious issues, if India takes initiative, automatically all those issues will be resolved, and that will directly or indirectly neutralize Chinese penetration or consolidation in South Asia region. And because that will automatically, because India doesn't have to do any specifically for that. And all those, like there could be around 10 contentious issues, and India must focus on that, like submission of EP's report, border issues, anti-treaty treaty, all those issues, then water issues, flood issues. These issues needs to be resolved. It's not a big issue. Then I think automatically the strategy communication will be improved. Government of it doesn't require any special attention, and relationship will be improved. And most importantly, the impression of the Indian policymakers that Nepal is a small state, it is not, it is dependent more on India. That impression or perception needs to be corrected, because being a small state is strategically is equally important to India. So India should treat Nepal as an equal partner in future, and that is where the strategic communication can be a starting point. By when the movement will start treating and equating Nepal as equal partner, I think the automatically relationship will be reignited and it will be strengthened in future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nihar, again for making useful suggestions on the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we have actually run out of our stipulated time, but I still have one very important speaker to invite to make some remarks, and this is Mr. Sunil Casey. Mr. Sunil Casey, thank you very much for collaborating with us to put together today's webinar, and I now request you to actually deliver your remarks, which are more like closing remarks, after which all that remains for me to do is to simply thank all of you for having come to our webinar today. So the floor is yours, Mr. Casey Sunil.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy, for having me on the webinar, and also I appreciate to you for accepting my request to organize the joint webinar on the very much important topic in the eve of the visit of the Indian Army Chief to Nepal by November 4. Let me touch, one of the very interesting thing, like, I would like to recognize, Major General Ashok Mehta, who I, would say that he's the common ambassador of Nepal and India in the military, because he belongs to the Gorkha Regiment, and he loves Nepal very much, and he had traveled almost part of the Nepal, and every year he comes to Nepal, and he is a real great friend of Nepal. And I would say he is the common ambassador between Nepalese and Indian military, who has been really playing an important role in reshaping the Nepal-India relations. And another interesting story is like when he married in India, and he was saying that he's a half Nepali. That's why he again did his wedding ceremony in Rara Lake, in Fewa Lake in Pokhara. So that's a very interesting story being done by the Indian Army officials who was in Gorkha Regiment. So that is what I thought to say, and I really appreciate his efforts in making the relationship very much well. And let me touch, to Ambassador Rakesh Sudh, that he said that the statement being floated by the India's Army Chief at the webinar being hosted by IDSA, that was, I think, that was a political statement, and that was quite surprising to the Nepalese audience, and that became very much controversial. Then after that, the Nepalese army, announced the potential visit of the Indian Army Chief to Nepal. Then the Nepalese people, they become very much angry due to that statement, and we actually were not expecting such kind of statement from the Indian Army Chief, as we know that Nepalese Army and Indian Army has the natural relationship, and it's a very unique relationship which you'll not find to rest of the world. So I think such kind of statement may may impact in our bilateral ties. And I also underscore the importance and the contribution being made by the Indian Army institution and the Nepali Army during the unofficial blockade in 2015. I think the Indian Army and Nepali Army, they played a very much significant role in opening that way. So that is one of the interesting thing. I think that we should appreciate the effort, and that also shows the importance of the relationship between Nepalese Army and the Indian Army. And I would like to recommend some of the things that India set up the National Defense University in 2013 in Haryana, India, and the Nepalese Defense Ministry is also planning to set up the Nepali Defense University. And Dr. Simkhada is one of the board members of that proposed university. And I think during the visit of the Indian Army Chief to Nepal, I think the discussion should happen for the collaboration on the education part, for the collaboration between the two institutions. And the Nepali Army Chief was also discussing some year back with his Bangladeshi counterpart in Kathmandu that he wanted to set up the military think tank in Kathmandu to engage to his former army officials to give the intellectual inputs. In this regard, I think IDSA could play an important role in that collaboration. I think that would also make some sense in deepening our military relationship. And another thing is like I have seen that there has been the less number of high-level visit from India and from Nepal is vice versa in the military spectrum. So I think that in days to come, there should be the frequent visit shall happen from the both sides, so that will help in deepening our relationship. And another important thing is like many of the Nepali army officers, they go to India in Pune or in Dehradun for the training purposes, and but only few Indians army officers, they come to Nepal for the training packages. And in that condition, I think we have to have the close cooperation in this training programs like the mountaineering training and high altitude training in Nepal. I think they should think to set up the mountain training institute in Nepal as well. That will also help to the regional security spectrum. And another thing what I would like to say is that Nepalese army and Indian army should think to create the joint task force for the mitigation of the disaster risk management in Nepal, which Nepal shall learn from the Indian army. And we also, the both army has to think that the climate change is one of the important, pertinent issues that is coming, and both army can also play the role, in the climate change programs as well. I think these are the points, I would love to share. And once again, thank you, Ambassador Chinoy, for being with us. And we do hope that we will organize similar kind of events in days to come. Thank you so much again for having with us together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sunil, for your helpful suggestions and for actually making my job easier. You summarized the proceedings very well. You came up with a slew of suggestions as well on how we can take this bilateral relationship forward to greater heights. Thank you for all that. I just want to tell you that the National Defense University that you referred to has yet to come up. In the meanwhile, the government of India has also passed a bill setting up the Rashtriya Raksha University in Gujarat, in Gandhinagar. It's unrelated to the one that you referred to. But we, on our part, the MP-IDSA, will be delighted to engage one or more institutions in Nepal whenever they are ready, at the level of comfort that they choose to have. Now, with this, actually, we must close our webinar. You'll all agree that it's been a very, very productive, useful engagement. People have spoken frankly, candidly, and with expertise and experience at their disposal too. Between all the panelists, we have immense experience of the bilateral relationship, and I have no doubt that we can overcome any difficulty that might come up in our bilateral relations. A few major points that struck me, and I'm not necessarily trying to summarize anything that all the erudite speakers have said. That would be very difficult for me to do. But I would simply say that it's very important for the two armies and the two countries, to be supported in their efforts to move ahead beyond the temporary difficulties, and that we must have a very stable and peaceful, sort of region, and especially the border regions of India and Nepal deserve that. I'm very confident, as speakers have said, that General Naravane's visit not only reflects the strength of our bilateral ties, but will also be successful. It will achieve its objectives of promoting friendly cooperation between our two countries, and notably between the two armies. Nepal must remain at the head of India's priorities. That's been brought out by a number of speakers, and I fully subscribe to that point of view. The Indian Army and the Nepal Army have very unique and fraternal relations, and long may it remain so. And we should all work hard to contribute towards that aim and objective. And I also take the point that in focusing on various stakeholders in Nepal, we must pay particular attention to the Nepal Army, which is a bastion of stability and integrity in Nepal. And they've proved their friendship and integrity towards India as well. And we cherish that. Finally, I again like what was said right at the beginning, which is that Purano Sambandh Ma Naya Avastha. I love that phrase because it's very innovative, it's very expressive. It gives great regard and respect to the history of our bilateral ties, and it also obviously requests and suggests that this historical relationship must not be taken for granted. It requires constant nurturing and nourishing, and that we must take into account current realities and provide for those realities within that ancient and historical relationship that we have between our two countries. So long live India-Nepal friendship, and long live military cooperation and friendly ties between the Indian Army and the Nepal Army. I thank you all very much for sparing so much of your valuable time to be with us at this webinar. We must continue these efforts. This is also part of our strategic communication between think tanks, between scholars, academicians, and former bureaucrats and generals. Let us keep it that way. Let us engage more, and we will not be found wanting in this regard at all. I wish you all good health and a very good evening. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Namaste.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.